I was quietly helping my 6-year-old granddaughter put away toys in the dusty attic of the house where she lives with my son and his new wife, when she suddenly dropped her favorite doll and whispered in a voice that made my blood run cold, "Grandma, don't tell my stepmother what we found up here." I knelt down beside her, my heart already starting to race, and asked what was wrong. She pointed with a trembling finger to a hidden box tucked behind old Christmas decorations and said, "Didn't you see what's in there with my real mother's name written on it?" I took Sophie's small, trembling hand in mine, and a cold dread, unlike anything I'd ever felt before, gripped my chest like an icy fist. If you're listening to this story right now, you're about to discover the terrifying truth that was hidden in that attic for 3 long years. A truth that nearly cost my granddaughter her life. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because I want to know how far this story reaches. I want other grandmothers, other families, to hear what happened to us and learn from our nightmare. The attic, which had always been just a place of dusty memories and forgotten Christmas ornaments, suddenly felt like the most dangerous place on earth. The dim afternoon light filtering through a small, grimy window barely illuminated the maze of cardboard boxes, old furniture covered in white sheets, and scattered children's toys that had been abandoned up there for years. But now, in this moment, with my granddaughter's words echoing in my ears, everything felt different. Everything felt wrong. I stared at the box Sophie was pointing to, and my heart nearly stopped. There, written in delicate handwriting that I recognized immediately, was the name Sarah. Sarah Williams. My son Robert's first wife, Sophie's biological mother, who had died 3 years ago in what we all believed was a tragic car accident on a rainy night. The woman who should have been here raising her daughter, living her life, growing old with my son. Instead, she was gone, and her belongings were supposed to have been donated to charity years ago. So what was this box doing here, hidden away like some terrible secret? Sophie had inherited her mother's clear blue eyes and that same sharp intuition that had always impressed everyone who met Sarah. Even at 6 years old, Sophie could sense things that adults missed, could feel when something wasn't right in a way that was almost supernatural. "Grandma?" she whispered again, her voice barely audible in the thick attic air. "Elena told Daddy and me that she donated all of Mommy's things to help poor people. She said it would make Mommy happy in heaven. But if that's true, then why is this box still here? Why did she lie to us?" Elena Vasquez, my son Robert's new wife, the woman who had swept into our lives like a guardian angel 2 years after Sarah's death. She was elegant, sophisticated, 35 years old, with the kind of beauty that turned heads wherever she went. She had won Robert over with her charm and grace, promising to be a loving stepmother to Sophie and a devoted wife to my grieving son. I had wanted so desperately to like her, to welcome her into our family, to believe that she could help heal the wounds that Sarah's death had left in all of our hearts. But now, standing in that suffocating attic with this hidden box staring me in the face, I began to question everything I thought I knew about the woman who was living in my son's house, sleeping in my daughter-in-law's bed, and raising my granddaughter. "Let's see what's inside this box, sweetheart," I murmured to Sophie, my hands already reaching for the cardboard flaps. Maybe there's a good explanation for why it's still here. But even as I said those words, I knew in my heart that there was no good explanation. Good people don't hide things. Good people don't lie about donating a dead woman's belongings to charity. Good people don't make 6-year-old children feel like they need to keep secrets from their parents. I carefully opened the box, and what I found inside made my hands start to shake uncontrollably. There were photographs of Sarah and Robert from their wedding day, from Sophie's birth, from family vacations and birthday parties and quiet moments at home. There was jewelry that I recognized from family gatherings. Sarah's grandmother's pearl necklace, her wedding ring, earrings that Robert had given her for their anniversary. There was Sarah's leather-bound diary, the one she had carried everywhere and written in every single day since she was a teenager. And then there were the documents. Official papers that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Life insurance policies with Sarah's name on them. Medical reports from the hospital where she had worked as a nurse. Police reports from the night of her accident. And at the very bottom of the box, a manila folder marked in red ink. Accident investigation, confidential, do not remove. Why would Elena have police reports about Sarah's accident? Why would she have confidential investigation files? And why, dear God, why would she lie about donating these things to charity? But that wasn't even the worst part of what we discovered that day. Because that's when we heard something that made every hair on my body stand on end. The sound of footsteps on the attic stairs. Slow, deliberate, measured steps. Someone was coming up to the attic, and somehow I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that we were in serious trouble. Sophie? Grandma Betty? Are y'all up there? Elena's voice drifted up through the attic opening, sweet as honey and smooth as silk, just like it always was. But there was something different about her tone today. Something that made my skin crawl, and my grandmother's instincts scream danger. There was an edge to her voice, sharp as a razor blade, that I had never heard before. I quickly closed the box and shoved it back behind the Christmas decorations, my heart pounding so hard I was sure Elena would be able to hear it from downstairs. "We're up here, Elena," I called back, trying desperately to keep my voice steady and normal while Sophie pressed herself against my side like a frightened animal. "Just looking for some old toys for Sophie to play with," I added, hoping that my voice didn't betray the terror that was coursing through my veins like poison. Elena appeared at the top of the attic stairs, and as always, she looked absolutely perfect. Her blonde hair was styled in those expensive waves that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. Her designer outfit looked like it had just come off a magazine cover, without a single wrinkle or stain, despite the fact that she'd supposedly been cleaning house all day. Her makeup was flawless, applied with the skill of a professional artist. But when those ice-blue eyes of hers swept across the attic and landed on the corner where I had just hidden Sarah's box, something shifted in her expression. It was subtle, so subtle that most people would have missed it entirely. But I didn't miss it. That picture-perfect smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, and in that moment, I saw something in Elena's face that chilled me to the bone. Fear. She was afraid. "But why? What exactly were y'all doing up here?" she asked, and for the first time since I had known her, her voice didn't sound completely sweet and caring. There was an edge to it now, cold and sharp and dangerous. "Just looking through some old toy boxes," I replied, placing my hand protectively on Sophie's shoulder. "You know how children love to explore and find treasures in grandparents' attics." Elena walked toward us, her high heels clicking ominously on the wooden attic floor. With each step, she seemed to grow more menacing, more threatening, even though her smile never wavered. Her eyes kept darting back to that corner where Sarah's box was hidden, like she could see right through the cardboard and Christmas decorations to the secrets that lay beneath. "I sure do hope y'all didn't go poking around in anything you shouldn't have," she said, and though she was still smiling that perfect smile, there was ice in her voice now. Pure, cold ice that made my blood freeze in my veins. "Some things up here are real private, you understand? Personal things that belong to this family. Things that are better left buried in the past where they belong, if you know what I mean." Sophie shrank against my leg, and I felt her small body trembling with fear. Even at 6 years old, she could sense the danger that was radiating from Elena like heat from a furnace. There was something in the way Elena was looking at us, calculating, predatory, like a wolf deciding whether or not to attack a pair of helpless sheep. "Of course not, honey," I lied, forcing my voice to remain calm and steady. "We were just looking at the old toy boxes, weren't we, Sophie? Just trying to find something fun to play with on a rainy afternoon?" Elena nodded slowly, but those cold blue eyes never warmed up, never lost that calculating, dangerous look. "Well, that's just wonderful to hear," she said, but her tone suggested that she didn't believe a word I was saying. "I think it's time for y'all to come on down from this dusty old attic now, though. It's getting late in the day, and Sophie needs to have her dinner and get ready for her bath." As we made our way down those creaky wooden attic stairs, Sophie squeezed my hand so tightly that I thought she might break my fingers. Her small palm was sweaty with fear, and I could feel her whole body shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. And that's when she whispered something that sent ice water through my veins and changed everything I thought I knew about the woman who was living in my son's house. "Grandma," she said in a voice so quiet I could barely hear her, "why did Elena look so scared when she saw us near Mommy's box? And why does she have Mommy's things if she really gave them all away like she told Daddy?" That innocent question from my 6-year-old granddaughter planted a seed of absolute terror in my heart, because Sophie was right. Elena hadn't looked angry or annoyed when she caught us in the attic. She had looked scared, genuinely, deeply frightened. And in my 72 years of life, I had learned that people only get that kind of scared when they have something terrible to hide. Something so terrible that they're willing to do anything to keep it secret. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have possibly imagined in my worst nightmares, was that our innocent discovery in that attic had just signed our death warrants. Elena had realized that Sophie and I had seen too much, knew too much, suspected too much. And she was already beginning to plan how to make both of us disappear forever, just like she had made Sarah disappear 3 years ago. That night, after I had taken Sophie back to my house for what I told Robert would be a fun grandmother-granddaughter sleepover, I couldn't get that box out of my mind. I sat in my favorite recliner with a cup of chamomile tea growing cold in my hands, staring out the window at the house where my son lived with his new wife, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, horribly wrong. Why would Elena lie about donating Sarah's belongings to charity? Why would she keep a hidden box of Sarah's most personal items, including police reports and investigation files? And why, when we discovered that box, did she look so frightened? What was she hiding? What was she so afraid we might find? The more I thought about it, the more pieces of a horrible puzzle began to fall into place in my mind. Elena claimed that she had barely known Sarah, that they had simply worked at the same hospital in different departments and had maybe exchanged pleasantries in the hallway a few times. She said that when she heard about Sarah's tragic accident, she had felt compelled to reach out to Robert and offer her condolences, and that their relationship had grown naturally from there. But if that was true, if Elena had barely known Sarah, then why would she have kept a box full of Sarah's most intimate possessions? Why would she have police reports and investigation files? And why would she lie about it? I picked up my phone with trembling hands and dialed Robert's number. He answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. He had been working double shifts at the construction company ever since Elena had convinced him that they needed to save money for Sophie's college fund. "Hey, Mom, is everything all right? It's pretty late for you to be calling." "Hi, sweetheart. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask you something about Elena. Something that's been bothering me." There was a pause, and I could hear him shifting around, probably sitting up in bed. "Sure, Mom? What's on your mind? How exactly did Elena know Sarah? I mean, what was their relationship really like when they worked together at the hospital?" Another pause, longer this time. "Mom, why are you asking about this? Did something happen today when you were over here?" I hesitated, not wanting to sound like a paranoid old woman who was imagining conspiracies where none existed. "I was just thinking about Sarah today. You know how I get sometimes. Missing her, wondering about her life before the accident." Robert sighed deeply. "Look, Mom, to be completely honest with you, I never really asked Elena for a lot of details about her relationship with Sarah. Elena told me that they worked in different departments at the hospital and that they barely knew each other. She said Sarah seemed like a sweet, caring person, but that they weren't friends or anything like that. They maybe said hello in the hallway a few times, but that was about it." "And you never thought to ask Sarah about Elena when she was alive?" "Mom, I never even knew Elena existed until after Sarah died. Sarah never mentioned her, never talked about her. The first time I ever heard Elena's name was when she called to offer her condolences after the funeral. That information hit me like a physical blow. If Sarah had never mentioned Elena, if they had barely known each other, then how did Elena know so much about our family? How did she know exactly what to say to comfort Robert? How did she know Sophie's favorite foods, her bedtime routine, her fears and dreams? And why, dear God, why did she have a box full of Sarah's personal belongings hidden in the attic?" Mom, are you still there? Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. Robert, can I ask you something else? When Elena first contacted you after Sarah's death, did she seem to know a lot about your family? About Sarah and Sophie? Well, yeah, now that you mention it. She seemed to know quite a bit about us. But I just figured that Sarah must have talked about us at work, you know? Nurses are always sharing stories about their families. But that didn't make sense. If Sarah and Elena barely knew each other, if they only exchanged pleasantries in the hallway, then why would Sarah have shared intimate details about her family life? Why would she have told a virtual stranger about Sophie's favorite bedtime stories or Robert's job at the construction company? Mom, is there something specific that's bothering you? You sound worried. I wanted so desperately to tell him about the box, about Elena's strange reaction when she found us in the attic, about the way Sophie had looked terrified. But something held me back. Some instinct told me that I needed to be very, very careful about how I proceeded. No, sweetheart. I was just missing Sarah today and thinking about how blessed we are to have Elena in our lives now. She's been such a wonderful addition to our family. She really has, Mom. I don't know what Sophie and I would have done without her. Elena saved us, you know? She helped us heal and move forward. I'm finally happy again, and Sophie adores her new stepmother. After I hung up the phone, I felt even more unsettled than before. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. And I was beginning to suspect that the woman living in my son's house, the woman who was raising my granddaughter, was not at all who she claimed to be. I decided to do something I had never done before in my life. I was going to investigate. I was going to find out exactly who Elena Vasquez really was and what she was hiding from my family. I opened my laptop computer and began searching for information about Sarah's accident. It didn't take long to find the newspaper article that had been published 3 years ago. Local nurse dies in single-car accident on Highway 9. The story was brief and to the point, just the basic facts that the police had released to the media. According to the article, Sarah had lost control of her car on a rainy night while driving home from visiting her sister Carla in the next town over. Her car had skidded off the road and crashed into a tree, bursting into flames on impact. She had been pronounced dead at the scene. The police had ruled it an accident, citing the dangerous road conditions and Sarah's apparent excessive speed as contributing factors. But as I read and reread the article, something began to nag at me. Something that didn't make sense. The article stated that Sarah had died on March 15th, and that she had been returning from her sister Carla's house after spending the evening there. But I distinctly remembered that Carla had been in Europe that entire month, celebrating her honeymoon with her new husband. She wasn't even in the country when Sarah died. So if Carla wasn't home that night, where had Sarah really been going? And why would she lie to Robert about visiting her sister? My hands were shaking as I continued searching online, digging deeper into the circumstances surrounding Sarah's death. That's when I found something that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. On the city's community events website, buried in the archives, I found a photograph from a grief counseling seminar that had taken place at the community center on March 14th, just 1 day before Sarah's accident. The seminar was titled Moving Forward After Loss, a workshop for families in grief, and it had been sponsored by the local hospital where both Sarah and Elena worked. And there, smiling in the group photograph of seminar attendees and speakers, was Elena Vasquez. Elena had been in town the day before Sarah died. She hadn't appeared in our lives by chance after the tragedy, drawn by sympathy and a desire to help a grieving family. She had been here all along, watching us, studying us, planning something that I was only beginning to understand. What if Sarah hadn't been going to visit her sister that night? What if she had been going to meet Elena? But why would they meet? And what could have happened during that meeting that led to Sarah's death just hours later? I closed the laptop with trembling hands, my mind racing with possibilities that I didn't want to consider. Maybe I was letting my imagination run wild, seeing conspiracies and plots where there were none. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation for everything I had discovered. But something deep in my grandmother's heart, some instinct that had been honed by 72 years of life and experience, was telling me that there was much more to this story than anyone knew. And that box in the attic, the box that Elena was so desperate to keep hidden, might hold all the answers I was looking for. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't have known, was that Elena had already figured out that I was getting suspicious. She had seen the way I looked at her when we came down from the attic. She had noticed how Sophie clung to me, how frightened my granddaughter had seemed, and she was already putting together a plan to silence me permanently before I could uncover the truth about what really happened to Sarah Williams. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing at 7 o'clock. It was Robert, and he sounded agitated, upset, not at all like his usual calm and cheerful self. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you go through Elena's personal belongings yesterday when you were at our house?" My heart started pounding like a drum in my chest. "What do you mean, sweetheart? I don't understand." "Elena told me that you were acting strange yesterday when you were in the attic with Sophie. She said you were asking weird questions about her relationship with Sarah, and that you seemed to be going through boxes that didn't belong to you. She's worried that you might be having some kind of episode." The word hit me like a slap across the face. Episode. Like I was some confused old woman who couldn't tell reality from fantasy. "Robert, I am not having any kind of episode. I'm as sharp as I've ever been, and you know it." "I know, Mom, I know. But you have to admit that you've been acting differently lately. More suspicious, more paranoid, asking questions about things that happened years ago. Elena thinks that maybe you're having trouble accepting that I've moved on from Sarah, that I'm happy with someone new." I felt sick to my stomach. Elena was already working to discredit me, already planting seeds of doubt about my mental state in my own son's mind. She was making him question my sanity, my reliability, my credibility as a witness to whatever terrible truth she was hiding. "Robert, listen to me very carefully. There is something not right about Elena. Sarah's belongings aren't donated to charity like she claimed. They're hidden in your attic, and when I accidentally discovered them, Elena got scared. Really, genuinely scared. Not angry, not annoyed, but frightened." "Mom, stop. Just stop right there." His voice was firm now, disappointed, like he was talking to a child who was misbehaving. "Elena already explained all of that to me. She kept a few sentimental items that belonged to Sarah, things that she thought Sophie might want to have when she gets older. That's not suspicious or sinister, Mom. That's thoughtful and caring. But she lied about donating them to charity." "She didn't lie, Mom. She donated most of Sarah's things and kept a few special items. There's nothing wrong with that. And the fact that you went through our private belongings without permission, that you were snooping around in our attic, that's not like you, Mom. That's not the woman who raised me." "I wasn't snooping. Sophie found the box, and, Mom, Elena also told me that Sophie seemed confused and upset after spending time with you yesterday. She thinks that maybe you're projecting your own unresolved grief onto a 6-year-old child, making her suspicious and fearful of the woman who's been nothing but loving and kind to her." After Robert hung up on me, I sat in my kitchen in stunned silence, staring at the phone in my hands like it was a snake that had just bitten me. Elena was more cunning, more manipulative than I had given her credit for. She had already gotten to Robert, had already made him question my mental state and my motives. And now she was using Sophie against me too, claiming that I was the one who was confusing and frightening my own granddaughter. But I couldn't give up. I wouldn't give up. If Elena was as dangerous as my instincts were telling me she was, then Sophie was in real, immediate danger. And I might be the only person in the world who could save her. That afternoon, I made a decision that would either prove my suspicions or confirm that I really was a paranoid old woman who was losing her grip on reality. I was going to visit my old friend Margaret, who had worked as a nurse supervisor at the same hospital where both Sarah and Elena had been employed. If anyone would know the truth about their relationship, if anyone could tell me who Elena Vasquez really was, it would be Margaret. I drove to the hospital with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. Margaret was working the afternoon shift in the cardiac unit, and when she saw me walking down the hallway toward her station, Her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Betty Williams, what a lovely surprise," she said, coming around the desk to give me a warm hug. "How are you holding up, honey? How's that beautiful granddaughter of yours?" "I'm doing all right, Maggie. Sophie's growing like a weed. Listen, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me. It's about Elena Vasquez. She's working here as a staff psychologist, right?" Margaret's expression changed immediately, her warm smile fading into something much more serious and concerned. "Oh, honey," she said, glancing around nervously to make sure no one was listening to our conversation. "Elena hasn't worked here for over a year now. Her employment was, well, let's just say it was terminated under very unpleasant circumstances." My blood ran cold. Elena had been lying about her job, lying about her current employment, lying about everything. "Terminated? What happened, Maggie?" Margaret looked around again, then leaned in closer and lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, Betty, but there were multiple complaints about Elena's behavior. Serious complaints from patients and their families." "What kind of complaints?" "She was getting way too involved with grieving families, especially widowed men who had young children. It was downright inappropriate, the way she would insert herself into their lives. She would show up at their homes uninvited, offer to babysit their children, ask personal questions about their finances and insurance policies. It made everyone uncomfortable." My heart was racing now, pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What else, Maggie? What else did she do?" The final straw was when we caught her going through patient files that she had no business accessing. She was looking up personal information about families, addresses, phone numbers, employment records. When confronted about it, she claimed she was just trying to provide better care. But nobody believed her. "Margaret, I need to ask you something specific. Was Elena obsessed with Sarah Williams?" Margaret's face went pale. "Oh, Betty. Oh, honey. Yes, she was. Elena was absolutely obsessed with Sarah, and it scared all of us who worked with them. She used to ask constant questions about Sarah's family, her husband, her little girl. She knew Sarah's work schedule better than Sarah did. She would find excuses to walk by Sarah's station, to be in the same areas of the hospital where Sarah was working. The pieces of the horrible puzzle were falling into place now, creating a picture that terrified me more than anything I had ever imagined. Did Sarah know about Elena's obsession? Sarah tried to be kind about it at first. You know how she was, always seeing the best in people, always trying to help. But toward the end, before the accident, Sarah was getting really uncomfortable with Elena's behavior. She came to me a few times, asking if there was anything she could do to make Elena leave her alone. What did you tell her? I told her to document everything, to keep a record of Elena's inappropriate behavior. I told her that if it continued, we would have to file a formal complaint with hospital administration. Margaret paused, her eyes filling with tears. But then Sarah died, and Elena quit her job just 2 days after the funeral. She said she needed time to process the grief of losing a colleague. But she wasn't grieving, was she? Margaret shook her head slowly. No, Betty, she wasn't grieving at all. If anything, she seemed excited, almost happy, like she had been waiting for something to happen, and it finally had. I left the hospital that day with my head spinning and my heart filled with a terror unlike anything I had ever experienced. Elena hadn't just known Sarah. She had been stalking her, obsessing over her, studying every detail of her life. And now Elena was living in Sarah's house, sleeping in Sarah's bed, raising Sarah's daughter, and living the life that should have belonged to my daughter-in-law. But I needed more than suspicions and coincidences. I needed concrete proof, something that would make Robert believe me, something that would convince the police to take action. And I had a terrible feeling that the proof I needed was hidden in that box in the attic, the box that Elena was so desperate to keep secret. That evening, as darkness fell over our quiet neighborhood, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going back to that attic, and I was going to find out exactly what Elena Vasquez was hiding from my family, even if it killed me. I waited until well after midnight, when I was sure that Robert would be asleep and Elena would be unconscious from the sleeping pills that she took every night. I had kept my spare key to Robert's house, the one he had given me years ago in case of emergencies, and I used it now to slip quietly through the front door like a thief in the night. The house was dark and silent, filled with shadows that seemed to reach out for me with grasping fingers. I crept through the familiar rooms, past the kitchen where Sarah used to make breakfast for her family, past the living room where she used to read bedtime stories to Sophie, past the photographs on the walls that showed a happy family that no longer existed. I made my way up the stairs, avoiding the steps that I knew would creak and give away my presence. The attic ladder was already down. Elena must have been up there recently, probably checking to make sure that her secrets were still safe. I climbed up into the attic, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. The box was still there, hidden behind the Christmas decorations exactly where I had left it. But this time, I was going to examine every single item until I found the truth that Elena was so desperate to hide. I opened the box with trembling hands and began going through the contents more carefully than I had before. Sarah's diary was there, filled with her neat handwriting and private thoughts. Her jewelry was there, sparkling even in the dim attic light. The photographs were there, capturing moments of joy and love that would never come again. And then, at the very bottom of the box, underneath everything else, I found something that made my hands shake so violently that I almost dropped it. A sealed envelope, yellowed with age, with words written across the front in Sarah's careful handwriting. For Robert, open only in case of emergency. Hide this where she will never find it. Inside that envelope was a letter that would haunt me for the rest of my life. A letter that revealed the true horror of what had happened to my family. My dearest Robert, if you are reading this letter, it means that something terrible has happened to me, and I pray to God with all my heart that I am wrong about what I suspect. Elena Vasquez is not who she claims to be. I have discovered that she was fired from the hospital for stalking patients and their families, for inserting herself into their lives in ways that were inappropriate and frightening. But that is not the worst part of what I have learned. I found newspaper clippings hidden in Elena's locker at work, articles about 3 different men who died in accidents over the past 5 years. All of them were young widowers with small children. All of them had recently married a woman named Elena Vasquez. All of them had substantial life insurance policies that made their new wives very wealthy women. Robert, I think Elena is planning to kill me. She has been asking strange questions about my life insurance policy, about Sophie's custody arrangements, about your work schedule, and when you will be home. Yesterday I found evidence that someone has been tampering with my car. The brake lines look like they have been cut and then poorly repaired. I have been trying to gather evidence against her, but I am running out of time. She is getting more aggressive, more desperate. She knows that I am suspicious of her, and I think she is planning to act soon. If something happens to me, please protect our daughter. Do not let Elena anywhere near Sophie. She is not just dangerous. She is a killer who uses marriage and motherhood as weapons to destroy families and steal their lives. I love you and Sophie more than life itself. Please keep our baby safe from this monster. All my love forever, Sarah P.S. I have hidden copies of all the evidence I found about Elena in our safety deposit box at First National Bank. Box number 247. The key is with my sister Carla. If anything happens to me, please get those documents and take them to the police. My vision blurred as tears streamed down my face, and I had to grip the edge of a nearby box to keep from collapsing. Sarah had known. She had discovered that Elena was a serial killer who targeted widowed fathers, and Elena had murdered her to keep that secret safe. And now Elena was planning to do the same thing to Sophie. I heard a car door slam in the driveway outside, and my blood turned to ice. Elena was home early from wherever she had been. I quickly stuffed the letter into my pocket and closed the box, but as I tried to make my way to the attic ladder, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that were moving with purpose and determination. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. I was trapped in that attic with the most damning evidence imaginable, and the woman who had killed my daughter-in-law was coming to find me. Elena appeared at the top of the attic ladder, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw her real face. The mask of sweetness and charm was completely gone, stripped away to reveal the monster that had been hiding underneath all along. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and absolutely terrifying. "Well, well, well," she said, her voice dripping with menace. "Grandma Betty, snooping around where she doesn't belong. I had a feeling you might try something like this." "Where's Sophie?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my whole body was shaking with fear. "Sophie is safe and sound, sleeping peacefully in her little bed, for now." Elena took a step closer to me, and I could see something glinting in her hand. A knife. "You know, Betty, you really should have minded your own business. You should have accepted that Robert had moved on, that he was happy with his new life. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you?" "I know what you are," I said, pulling Sarah's letter from my pocket with trembling hands. "I know what you did to Sarah, and I know about the other men you killed." Elena actually laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl and my blood freeze in my veins. "Oh, you found Sarah's little insurance policy. How precious. Too bad she wasn't smart enough to keep her mouth shut and stay out of my business. You murdered her in cold blood." "I didn't murder anyone, Betty. Sarah died in a tragic accident, just like the newspaper said. A very convenient accident, I'll admit, but an accident nonetheless." Elena's smile was pure evil, the smile of a predator who had cornered her prey. "You see, Sarah was driving on a dangerous road in the middle of a thunderstorm. I just made sure that her brakes wouldn't work when she needed them most. She was confessing to cold-blooded murder, like she was discussing the weather forecast." "But why?" I whispered. "Why did you kill her? What did Sarah ever do to you?" "Because I wanted her life, you stupid old bat. I wanted her husband, her house, her money, her perfect little family. I had been watching them for months, studying them, learning everything about their routines and their relationships. Sarah was just an obstacle that needed to be removed so that I could step into her place." "And Sophie? What are you planning to do to that innocent child?" Elena's expression turned even colder, if that was possible. "Children have accidents all the time, Betty. Especially curious little children who ask too many questions and remember too much about their dead mothers. Sophie has been getting suspicious lately, asking uncomfortable questions about why I have her mother's things, why I know so much about their family history. She's becoming a problem that needs to be solved." That's when I realized the full scope of Elena's plan. She wasn't just going to kill Sophie. She was going to make it look like an accident, just like she had done with Sarah and those 3 other men. And then she would comfort Robert through his grief, help him heal from the loss of his daughter, and eventually inherit everything he owned. "You're completely insane," I whispered. "I'm not insane, Betty. I'm practical. I'm a survivor. And you, unfortunately, have become a very big problem that needs to be solved permanently." Elena raised the knife, and I could see my death reflected in the blade. But before she could take another step toward me, we heard something that changed everything. A small, frightened voice calling from somewhere in the house below us. "Grandma Betty? Grandma Betty, are you here? I heard voices and I'm scared." Sophie was awake. She was in the house, and she was about to walk right into this nightmare. Elena's eyes lit up with a terrible, predatory excitement. "Perfect," she said. "Now I can take care of both of my problems at once. This is going to work out even better than I planned." But Elena had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated a 6-year-old girl who was much smarter and braver than anyone gave her credit for. "Daddy! Daddy! Help me!" Sophie's voice suddenly rang out through the house, loud and clear and absolutely terrified. "Somebody help me! Grandma Betty's in trouble!" Elena spun toward the attic opening, furious and panicked. "Shut up, you little brat! Shut your mouth right now!" But then we heard something that made Elena's face go white with terror. The sound of the front door slamming open with tremendous force, followed by heavy footsteps running through the house. "Sophie! Sophie! Where are you? What's wrong?" Robert's voice boomed through the house, filled with panic and desperation. Elena's carefully laid plans were falling apart. "He's supposed to be at work," she whispered, her voice shaking with rage and fear. He's supposed to be working the night shift. Daddy, Grandma Betty's in the attic and Elena has a knife, Sophie screamed from somewhere below us. She's trying to hurt Grandma Betty. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs, and then Robert burst through the attic opening like an avenging angel, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror. Sophie was right behind him, tears streaming down her face, her small body shaking with terror. Mom? Elena? What in God's name is going on here? Elena quickly tried to hide the knife behind her back and force her sweet, innocent smile back into place. Robert, thank goodness you're here. Your mother broke into our house in the middle of the night and was going through Sarah's personal belongings. When I tried to talk to her, when I tried to reason with her, she became violent and threatening. I was just trying to protect myself and Sophie. That's a lie, I shouted, pulling Sarah's letter from my pocket and waving it in the air. Robert, you need to read this right now. It's a letter from Sarah. She knew that Elena was going to kill her. Robert looked back and forth between us, his face pale and confused, clearly struggling to process what he was seeing and hearing. What letter? Mom, what are you talking about? Your mother is having a complete psychotic break, Robert, Elena said, her voice dripping with false concern and manufactured sympathy. She's been stalking our family, making up wild conspiracy theories, living in a fantasy world where I'm some kind of villain. Look at her. She's completely delusional, completely out of touch with reality. I am not delusional, I screamed at the top of my lungs. Elena is not a psychologist. She was fired from the hospital for stalking patients and their families. She's killed 3 men before Sarah, and now she's planning to kill Sophie. Robert's face went pale as death. Mom, that's impossible. That's completely insane. Read the letter. I thrust the paper toward him with shaking hands. It's in Sarah's handwriting. You know your wife's handwriting better than anyone in the world. Robert hesitated, looking back and forth between me and Elena, clearly torn between believing his mother and believing the woman he had married. Sophie ran to him and wrapped her small arms around his legs, pressing her face against his stomach. Daddy, she whispered, her voice muffled by his shirt. Elena told me yesterday that we were going on a special trip together, just me and her. She said we were going to go far away and that I couldn't tell anyone about it, not even you. She said it was our secret and that if I told anyone, something bad would happen to you. Robert knelt down beside his daughter, his face filled with concern and growing alarm. What trip, sweetheart? I don't know anything about any trip. When was this supposed to happen? Tomorrow morning, Sophie said, her voice barely audible. She said we were leaving tomorrow morning while you were at work, and that we might not come back for a very long time. Daddy, she's lying about everything, Sophie suddenly shouted, her voice filled with a courage and determination that amazed me. And then she did something that shocked all of us. She ran to one of the boxes in the corner of the attic and pulled out an old cell phone that I hadn't noticed before. Look what I found when I was playing up here yesterday. It's Mommy's phone. Robert took the phone from his daughter's hands, and I could see his face change as he recognized it. This is Sarah's phone. It disappeared after the accident. The police said it was probably destroyed in the fire, that we would never find it. Elena was starting to panic now, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack and crumble. I found it at the accident scene and kept it as a memento of Sarah. I was going to give it to you when I thought you were ready to handle it emotionally. Why didn't you tell me you had it? Robert's voice was getting harder, more suspicious, more angry. Why would you hide something like this from me? Why would you keep it secret? Robert, please, you're scaring me, Elena said, but her voice was shaking now, and I could see sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool attic air. You're believing the paranoid fantasies of a confused old woman and a 6-year-old child who doesn't understand what she's saying. But Robert was already trying to turn on the phone, his hands shaking as he searched his pockets for a charger. The battery was completely dead, but he had a phone charger in his work bag downstairs. As he waited for the phone to power up, he finally took Sarah's letter from my hands. I watched his face change as he read, watched the color drain from his cheeks as the horrible truth began to sink in. First confusion, then shock, then a cold, terrible anger that I had never seen before in my gentle, loving son. Elena, he said, his voice deadly quiet and controlled. "Can you explain to me why my dead wife wrote that you're not actually a psychologist? And why she mentions 3 dead husbands in this letter?" Elena tried to laugh, but the sound came out strangled and hysterical. "Robert, you can't seriously be believing the paranoid fantasies of a dead woman. Sarah was obviously having some kind of mental breakdown before she died. She was imagining things, making up stories." That's when Sarah's phone finally turned on with a soft chime. Robert scrolled through it for several long minutes, his face getting whiter and whiter with each passing second. "There are text messages here," he said, his voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "Messages that Sarah sent to her sister Carla on the night she died. She says that you were following her, Elena. She says that someone had been tampering with her car, that she was afraid for her life." Elena took a step backward, her eyes darting around the attic like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. "Robert, I can explain all of this. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything. And there are photos," Robert continued, his voice getting louder and more angry. "Photos of newspaper articles that Sarah downloaded from the internet, death certificates, insurance policies. 3 different men, all dead in suspicious accidents, all recently married to women named Elena Vasquez." The silence in that attic was deafening, broken only by the sound of Sophie's quiet sobbing and Elena's rapid, panicked breathing. The truth was finally out in the open, and there was no way for Elena to lie her way out of it anymore. Elena looked around the attic one more time, like a cornered animal searching for an escape route that didn't exist. And then something in her snapped completely. The mask of sweetness and innocence fell away entirely, revealing the cold-blooded killer that had been hiding underneath all along. "Fine," she snarled, her voice now cold and vicious and filled with hatred. "You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. Your precious Sarah was a nosy, interfering little bitch who couldn't mind her own business. She found things that she had no right to find, asked questions that she had no right to ask." Robert stood up slowly, his whole body trembling with rage, and moved to put Sophie behind him, shielding her from the monster that had been living in their house. "You killed my wife." "I eliminated an obstacle," Elena said with a casual shrug, as if she were discussing what to have for dinner. "Sarah was standing in the way of what I wanted, what I deserved. I wanted you, Robert. I wanted your life, your house, your money, your beautiful daughter. And that sanctimonious little saint was standing between me and everything I had worked so hard to get. And Sophie?" Robert's voice was barely controlled rage, a father's fury at the threat to his child. "What were you planning to do to my daughter?" Elena looked at Sophie with eyes that were completely cold and calculating, devoid of any human warmth or compassion. "Accidents happen to children all the time, Robert. Especially children who remember too much about their dead mothers, who ask too many uncomfortable questions, who might someday figure out the truth about what really happened." That's when Robert completely lost control. "You psychotic bitch," he roared, lunging toward Elena. "You were going to murder my child." Elena laughed, a sound that would haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. "I've done it before, Robert, 3 times actually. And it always worked perfectly until this meddling old cow stuck her nose where it didn't belong." She looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. "You should have stayed quiet, Betty. You should have minded your own business and let me live the life I deserved. Now I'm going to have to kill all 3 of you, and it's going to be much messier than I had planned." Elena pulled the knife out from behind her back, the blade glinting in the dim attic light. But before she could take another step toward us, we heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. Lots of sirens, getting closer and closer by the second. Elena's face went white with panic and confusion. "What? How? Who called the police?" That's when Sophie held up a small cell phone with a proud, brave smile on her tear-stained face. "I called 911 when I heard Elena being mean to Grandma Betty. My teacher at school taught us the emergency number, and she said to call it whenever we were scared or in danger. My brave, brilliant 6-year-old granddaughter had saved all of our lives." Elena tried to run for the attic ladder, but Robert grabbed her and held on tight, wrestling the knife away from her as they struggled. They fought for several terrifying seconds until we heard heavy footsteps on the stairs and police officers burst into the attic with their weapons drawn. "Elena Vasquez," said the lead officer, a tall man with kind eyes and a gentle voice, "you are under arrest for the murder of Sarah Williams and the attempted murder of Betty Williams and Sophie Williams." As they dragged Elena away in handcuffs, she screamed at us with a voice filled with rage and hatred. "You can't prove anything. It's all circumstantial evidence. I'll be out of jail in a week, and when I am, I'm going to finish what I started." But she was wrong. We had Sarah's letter, which detailed Elena's crimes and her plans. We had the phone with all the evidence that Sarah had gathered. We had Elena's full confession, which Sophie had been smart enough to record on her little phone. And most importantly, we had each other, and we had survived. The investigation that followed revealed horrors beyond what any of us had imagined in our worst nightmares. Elena really had killed 3 previous husbands, always using the same method: marrying vulnerable widowers with young children, taking out large life insurance policies, and then causing accidents that left her wealthy and free to move on to her next victim. Sarah had discovered the pattern and had tried to gather evidence to expose Elena, but Elena had killed her before she could reveal the truth. Elena was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, she tried to claim insanity, tried to convince the jury that she was a victim of mental illness who couldn't control her actions. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury saw through her lies. She was a cold, calculating serial killer who had used marriage and motherhood as weapons to destroy families and steal their lives. Sophie needed months of therapy to deal with the trauma of what she had experienced, but she proved to be remarkably resilient. She told her therapist that she had always known something was wrong with Elena, that she had always felt scared and uncomfortable around her new stepmother, but that she hadn't known how to explain what she was feeling to the adults in her life. "Grandma Betty," she said to me one evening as we sat together on my front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, "why don't grown-ups listen when kids say they're scared of someone?" That question broke my heart and filled me with shame, because she was absolutely right. We adults are so quick to dismiss children's instincts, so eager to explain away their fears as imagination or childish nonsense. We think that we know better, that we understand the world in ways that children cannot. But Sophie had understood that Elena was dangerous long before any of the adults in her life had caught on. Her instincts had been trying to warn us, and we had been too blind and too stubborn to listen. Robert and I have completely reconciled, and our relationship is stronger now than it has ever been. He apologized to me over and over again for doubting me, for letting Elena manipulate him against his own mother, for not trusting the woman who had raised him and loved him unconditionally his entire life. "Mom," he told me through tears one night, "you saved my daughter's life. You saved all of our lives. If you hadn't trusted your instincts, if you hadn't kept digging for the truth, even when everyone thought you were crazy, I would have lost Sophie too. I would have lost everything that matters to me in this world." Today, more than a year later, our family is stronger and more united than we have ever been. Robert has decided not to date anyone for the foreseeable future, choosing instead to focus on being the best father he can be to Sophie, and on healing from the trauma of discovering that he had been living with his first wife's killer. Sophie and I have developed an even closer bond through this ordeal. She calls me her detective grandma, and has promised to always tell me when something or someone makes her feel uncomfortable, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem. We have learned to trust each other completely, to listen to each other's fears and concerns without judgment or dismissal. They sold the house where Elena had lived with them, the house where she had slept in Sarah's bed and planned Sophie's murder. Robert said he couldn't bear to live there anymore, knowing that a killer had walked those hallways and sat at their dinner table and tucked his daughter into bed each night while plotting her death. They moved into a beautiful new house just 3 blocks away from mine, close enough that I can see Sophie every single day and watch over her the way I should have been doing all along. The new house is filled with light and laughter, with the sounds of a little girl playing and growing and healing from the nightmare that nearly destroyed her. Sophie is happy now, truly happy in a way that she never was when Elena was in her life. She plays with her friends, excels in school, and has started taking piano lessons. She talks about her mother Sarah often, sharing memories and asking questions about the woman who gave her life. We keep Sarah's memory alive in our hearts and in our daily conversations, making sure that Sophie knows how much her mother loved her and how proud Sarah would be of the brave, intelligent young lady she is becoming. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I sit by my bedroom window and look out at the house where my son and granddaughter are sleeping safely, and I think about Sarah. I think about how she tried to protect us even from beyond the grave, how she had the foresight to write that letter and hide the evidence that would eventually bring her killer to justice. That letter probably saved Sophie's life, and it definitely saved our family from complete destruction. Elena may be rotting in a prison cell for the rest of her miserable life, but Sarah finally got the justice she deserved. The truth came out. Her killer was caught and punished, and her daughter is safe and loved and surrounded by people who will protect her with their lives. The lesson I learned from this nightmare is both simple and profound. Always, always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, if someone makes you uncomfortable, if your gut is telling you that danger is near, don't ignore those feelings. Don't let other people convince you that you're being paranoid or crazy or overly suspicious. Your instincts exist for a reason. They are your body's way of protecting you from threats that your conscious mind might not recognize. And most importantly, listen to children when they tell you they're scared or uncomfortable around someone. Children have an innocence and intuition that allows them to see things that we adults often miss or choose to ignore. They haven't learned yet to make excuses for bad behavior or to give people the benefit of the doubt when they don't deserve it. When a child tells you that someone makes them feel scared or uncomfortable, believe them. Investigate. Ask questions. Protect them. Sometimes a 6-year-old child can see evil more clearly than the adults around her. Sometimes a stubborn grandmother's suspicions and a little girl's courage are the only things standing between a family and a monster wearing a beautiful mask. If you're listening to this story and you have children or grandchildren in your life, please take this message to heart. Believe them when they say something doesn't feel right. Ask questions when their behavior changes unexpectedly. Trust that little voice in your head that tells you when something is off, even if you can't put your finger on exactly what it is. Because family love and protection are the most powerful weapons we have against the evil that sometimes walks among us, wearing friendly faces and speaking sweet words. The people who love us most are often the ones best equipped to recognize when we're in danger, even when we can't see it ourselves. And if you're in a situation right now where your gut is telling you that someone in your life isn't who they claim to be, if you're feeling suspicious or uncomfortable or afraid, don't ignore those feelings. Don't let anyone convince you that you're being irrational or paranoid. Investigate. Ask hard questions. Dig for the truth. Protect the people you love, even if others think you're being crazy or overprotective. In the end, the family we choose to protect with everything we have is the family that will protect us right back. Love is stronger than evil. Truth is more powerful than lies, and sometimes the most unlikely heroes, a stubborn grandmother and a brave little girl, can move mountains and catch monsters. I would love to hear from all of you in the comments about times when your instincts warned you about someone, or when a child in your life tried to tell you something important that the adults around them weren't hearing. Your stories and experiences might help someone else recognize danger before it's too late, might give another family the courage to trust their instincts and ask the hard questions that could save their lives. If this story has touched your heart or made you think about the people in your own life, if it has reminded you to trust your instincts and listen to the children around you, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps me continue sharing these important stories about family, protection, love, and the power of trusting our deepest instincts about the people in our lives. Until next time, remember this: a grandmother's love and a child's intuition can move mountains and catch monsters. Never underestimate the power of family looking out for family. and never ignore that voice inside your head that's trying to keep you safe. Trust your instincts, protect your loved ones, and always remember that love is the strongest force in the universe. Thank you for listening to our story, and may you and your families always be safe, protected, and surrounded by people who truly love you.